The biggest risk in Bitcoin is not the price action or quantum computing. The biggest risk in Bitcoin is not owning Bitcoin. And this kind of has a double meaning, right? It doesn't only mean that everyone should buy Bitcoin right now. Yes, that is a risk. I think one of the biggest risks is people completely ignoring Bitcoin and choosing to own absolutely zero of it. But the other side of that, when I say the risk is not owning Bitcoin, is not self-custodying your own Bitcoin and just letting someone else control your Bitcoin for you. So a lot of people will do this instead of owning Bitcoin, the asset itself, and self-custody. They will own a Bitcoin ETF or just invest in strategy, MSTR, or they will just leave their Bitcoin on Coinbase or Kraken or River or Strike or whatever. And again, while I think those people are ahead of the no-coiners who completely ignore Bitcoin and choose not to allocate even a small percentage of their portfolio, when you don't self-custody your own Bitcoin, you're opening yourself up to a host of other counterparty risks. For example, if, things change or, just stay the same, right? The country that you live in, the government could become hostile to Bitcoin. And these exchanges, right, they have to be compliant with these government entities. So this would be a big honeypot potentially, for a government that's hostile to Bitcoin to go after the exchange and go after that Bitcoin. So again, it's a lot harder to go after Bitcoin in self-custody in deep cold storage, right? Right, it's similar to the 6102 attack in the 1930s where the United States confiscated privately held gold, right? Obviously, that would be a lot easier for them if all the gold was just centralized in one place, but it was, somewhat of an honor system where the citizens had to turn in their gold, and that basically was enough. So again, the power of Bitcoin is its sovereignty and the freedom that it gives you to travel with your wealth. Right? You don't get that freedom and that sovereignty by holding a Bitcoin ETF or holding MSTR stock or by leaving your Bitcoin on an exchange. I still think leaving it on the exchange is the next step, away from an ETF. It's a step above that, but you're essentially owning an IOU for Bitcoin. So when you try to withdraw your Bitcoin, that exchange, right, if you're withdrawing Bitcoin to self-custody, the exchange simply sends Bitcoin from a address that they control to a Bitcoin address that you control. So again, you still technically have the right to that Bitcoin, the financial right to that Bitcoin, but you only actually receive that Bitcoin in an address that you control when you withdraw it. And we've seen this problem play out before. Exchanges that went under or weren't really solvent didn't actually have the Bitcoin to be able to send their customers, right? And some of this risk is mitigated, of course, with exchanges like River. They provide proof of reserves. They show the wallet addresses that prove that they own the Bitcoin that they say they do. But again, there's still an aspect of counterparty risk there. They could mismanage the keys. They could, lose the keys. Obviously, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but these are possibilities. So again, we talked about the risk of not holding your own Bitcoin, but there's also the other side, like I said, which is owning zero Bitcoin, which I rant about all the time. Owning zero Bitcoin is a very irresponsible financial decision, right? By owning zero Bitcoin, you're misunderstanding the asymmetrical risk of a finite supply asset. And no coiners, like I said, are severely underestimating what just a small amount of Bitcoin could mean in the future. And again, not to harp on it, but controlling your own keys, owning your own Bitcoin, controlling the keys to your wallet puts you even in the upper echelon of Bitcoin owners. And again, there's really no excuse for owning zero Bitcoin, right? When you can buy, $10 a month worth of Bitcoin. And even coming from people who advocate for a diversified portfolio, you should diversify your risk into different buckets. Those people still won't allocate, even a half of a percentage of their portfolio to Bitcoin, the world's first absolutely scarce perfect form of money. And again, not that there's zero risk to that, right? Your allocations should still match like the risks and the probabilities of different outcomes. Even if you see all these different risks to Bitcoin, you're skeptical, you should still be able to calculate the probabilities of these things actually happening. Like, people love to talk about, quantum computing and this and that, and what if the government shuts it off or whatever. So, okay, calculate the odds of that happening and allocate accordingly, right? There's no reason then that you should, not own a $50 UTXO of Bitcoin. So if you want to get some Bitcoin for yourself, like I said, I trust River the most out of any exchange, but the goal is self-custody. I have a referral link. I'm not sponsored by River, but we'll both get some Bitcoin if you sign up and exchange fiat dollars for Bitcoin. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, together, let's work, save, and build a better future with Bitcoin. See you in the next video.